summary, what I think you should do is just focus on your local market, or at least on your region, but don't go to another region where people are parachuting and coming every 3 months to see you, because the consequences of what I've seen after the first Web 1.1 bubble in 2000, a lot of companies that had, I mean, a lot of portfolios that had one or two companies and you couldn't do anything, you'll be stuck because the guy on the other side of the VC has one portfolio company, the fund is 7 years, he doesn't want to sell because he's going to lose his job, and then you're stuck. He has no interest, he's not aligned with you. Either he worked for a bank that had a private equity fund, so he wants to keep his job. So the bottom line is, be patient. I will look into my country. If you have a very, very global idea, perhaps go, but then consider the time and the effort that it will take to get there. Some companies, and Endeavor is the best enabler to do this because of the global network. And I'm in New York, I see a lot of entrepreneurs. Throughout the history of Endeavor, there has been, percentage-wise, a few cases that raised money in the US very successfully, but look at that number, it's small. And Brazil is probably an example where the local funds are more keen, not only to fund the companies, but to make them more successful. So it's not only about the money, but what the VC can give to you. You bring a new partner into your company. When you bring management, you bring a partner that provides the human capital skills. When you bring the venture capital, you also need to consider the other parts, not only money.
I would just add one thing too. It's not just VCs are sources of capital, right? Beyond angels, beyond family and friends, and different sort of institutional money. Corporate VCs are doing a lot of Intel and IBM have made. IBM, I believe, made 60 acquisitions last year. So they've taken advantage of the lull in the access to public markets for IPOs. Entrepreneurs haven't had access to public money, and therefore, some of these companies have been able to go in and cherry pick software startups at very attractive prices. But it's a very real option and worth exploring depending on what type of business. There's almost always some established player that has an interest in your space if you're actually innovative and a game changer in some form.
Great, let's go to Alexander.
I have a question. I had 3 investors. Now I have 2. One very big VC, one small VC, and a strategic investor. The very big VC did nothing to happen. They put the money and they disappeared. The small VC, they are always together with us, trying to help us, etc. And the strategic investor that was where I really imagined we would get the most help, they did nothing because they want to bring us to Europe, and they had customers in Europe that hated our technology because they were afraid of our technology, and they told you, if you bring this technology to Europe, we will stop to work with you. So they didn't do anything. So now, recently, I was approached by a huge potential strategic investor again. How can I it's not so easy to answer that, but how can I be sure, or at least try to not to repeat the same mistake to get a wrong strategic partner again? Because they are so huge that I'm dreaming about this partnership, but I'm afraid because the other one did nothing. So I know you are from VCs now, or private equities, but how to find the right strategic investor? We developed a technology to point-of-sale devices, credit card terminals. Basically, what we did, we created a browser for the POSs, and POSs are incompatible between each other. But we made a layer of software that turn all POSs into compatible machines. So the POS vendors, the manufacturers, they hate us because usually they tie the customer to themselves because of the difficulty to develop software. Since we put the browser, anyone can develop software. The application is the same. So in Europe, They were afraid because we succeeded in Brazil. They didn't want that our technology went to Europe. And our partner, they are from France. So when they presented our technology, the National Association of Payment Companies, etc., and they were approached by the POS devices manufacturers, they told, if you come here with these guys, I will not work with you anymore. That was a problem.
The only thing I can tell you is that the normal process is you bring a VC first, or private equity once you start growing, and your exit is either the public market or the strategic. So it seems to me that you have mixed the whole process into one place without knowing too many of the details. There's nothing wrong with bringing a large VC and a small VC, and in most cases, sometimes you see more than one group making the investment. The question is, do they know each other? Do they work together? You have to do that research ahead of time. It seems to me that you have a restructuring in play right now, and you need to figure out what to do with your partners.
Well, one thing for sure is if you have to look at the marketplace, and these guys, if you're threatening their business, they're certainly not the people you want to be looking to. You know, so you need to find who their natural enemy is and go get some advice from them, and try and figure out what forces can line up behind your business, and where the fear versus greed line is, because where there's fear, there's certainly going to be greed on some level, and somebody's certainly looking at your technology as a way to consolidate and disintermediate these existing players. I mean, to me, it sounds like a brilliant idea, just off the top of my head. And I can imagine there's a lot of players who would like to get into it. It sounds very disruptive.
Make sure you have a good lawyer. Make sure you have a good legal counsel.
I guess I would say, if I were in your position, what I would try to do is I would try to build in protections, as he said, make sure you have a good lawyer. So I would clearly, let's take a step back. So at the beginning, since you've been disappointed in your previous experience with investors, and assuming you don't need the money, assuming it's not essential that you get the money, and then you're doing this more out of strategic benefit to grow rather than because you absolutely need the money. If that's the case, then I would clearly define at the outset exactly what your expectations are from the investors, and find out what their expectations are with you, and talk about it openly, because the last thing you want is to relive the experience you had the last time with your other investors. Once you've defined exactly what you expect from them, put it into the contract, and tie, the dilution and other, the scaling and the dilution and other factors towards the meeting of those objectives. And that way, if they don't perform, then you have the money and you benefit. So that's definitely what I do. And they're going to insist on milestones from you. You can insist on some milestones from them, and that's sort of a good litmus test to see if they're really serious about meeting these goals, right? So.
I would just add on that last point, because this came up when we were structuring this deal with Salvadorians, because it was a marketing company, and essentially we're in business together a bit, but the term of it was such, 5 years is a long time. So their milestones actually had warrants associated with it, so their equity interest in our company would increase if they met the milestones. So put something behind milestones like that's real, and potentially you're prepared to do the same thing on your side, but I'm saying, think about that.